Hello everyone, and welcome to the final session of today's content and the concluding also session of the Food Biotech Congress. This is also a really interesting session, so glad to be finishing it on looking at investment again, as we started off the day looking at investment, but this time looking at the North American market. Just a quick reminder to all those who might be joining this session for the first time, but I'm sure many of you have heard me say this quite a lot over the last couple of days. Feel free to ask any questions or share any comments or any thoughts in the live discussion box, which you can find at the right-hand bottom of the screen. We want this discussion to be as interactive as possible, as the other discussions have been earlier on in the day and yesterday, which has been great. So we're interested and looking forward to hearing your questions. And I will move quite swiftly and move over to introducing our moderator. Sujala, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. Nice to be here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And would also like to thank the organizers at Food Biotech Congress and making this happen. As an entrepreneur in the food tech space, I feel like it's a privilege to be able to interview four VCs here and ask questions. So I am really looking forward to this. Just a quick introduction about myself. I am a food scientist turned entrepreneur. I am currently the CEO of Rainfed Foods. At Rainfed Foods, we are the world's first company in commercializing millets for their ability to be the future of plant-based proteins. For those who don't know what millets are ancient grains, technically seeds. They are climate resilient and identified as one of the top 50 future food crops. So we're creating plant-based alternatives, starting with dairy using millets. Now I will invite Andrew to introduce yourself, please.
That's me, I guess, Andrew. All right, so Sean's picture came up. Sean and I look only vaguely similar. Hey, so my name's Andrew Towle. I am the founding partner with another guy named James Calley, who some of you may know, for Nextgen Nutrition Investment Partners. We're an emerging fund. We're raising $75 million focused on food and beverage startups. I guess the pithy piece of our presentation is that our name says it all. So Nextgen Nutrition, we're investing in foods that are fundamental and drive potentially societal positive nutritional outcomes. And then the word investment partners is just that. We are food and beverage experts. We've spent 60 years between the two of us in food and beverage companies, working for the big food companies you've all heard of: P&G, Heinz, Kraft, Mondelez, Kellogg's, people like that. And we, after 60 years of doing this, we said, hell, we don't want to do another annual operating plan. It was no more exciting than the last one. And besides all the fun stuff that's happening outside in the venture space, so we said, let's leverage our knowledge and skills to go partner with people like that. And so we formed Nextgen Nutrition as a result. So we're focused on healthy beverages and snacks, food technology, and functionally superior ingredients. So that's who we are.
Fabulous, thank you. Tom, can I invite you next?
Absolutely, thank you, Sujala, and great to be here, everyone. So my name is Tom Mastrobuoni. I'm the Chief Investment Officer here at Big Idea Ventures. Prior to joining this firm, I was one of the founding partners that helped launch and take forward the Tyson Ventures effort within Tyson Foods. So Andrew, I miss my AOP, like desert misses the rain, man. I miss it. Prior to that, spent the bulk of my career in private equity, venture capital, growth equity funds. Started my career in public accounting. And here at BIV, we focus, our first fund, New Protein Fund, is focused on seed stage alternative proteins. So cell, plant, and fermentation-based alternatives to meat, dairy, and seafood. Our firm is also launching a new fund focused on commercializing university IP in the areas of food, protein, and ag, with an additional focus on driving economic growth and development in rural communities.
Great, thanks, Tom. Sean.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sean OSullivan, and yeah, I started out as an entrepreneur, an engineer, inventor type person. My first company helped enable me to make the transition to a venture capitalist as it went public. And so I've been a angel investor, super angel investor since the late 90s. and really a VC with a staff of other GPs and whatnot through the firm SOSV, which I founded, probably since around 15 years or so, is where we officially started with a bunch of other people helping out grow the portfolio. So we manage over $1 billion. We have about 120, 130 staff globally, and we invest through our programs, our startup development programs that IndieBio, for example, and HAX. IndieBio is the world's leading and most active life sciences accelerator, and HAX is the same for hardware.
Thanks, Sean. Brian, last but not least.
Thanks, Sujala. I'm Brian Frank. I'm the founder and general partner of FTW Ventures, a emerging VC for food and agricultural technology, or any technology that helps make a more sustainable food system. I, like other people on this panel, am a recovering entrepreneur myself, having built and sold a number of high-tech startups to big companies like Twitter and Google. But I realized that there was a unique opportunity happening in the food and agricultural world to up-level this $10 trillion market with new science and technology. So I began angel investing in the 2015 timeframe, working with leading top-tier VCs, top accelerators like IndieBio and HAX with Sean, and a number of other kind of leading entrepreneurs and startups in the food and agricultural technology space. We deploy checks at the very early stage, so seed and pre-seed, in technology companies that are going to transform some aspect from agriculture, from the farm or the new farm, which are bioreactors, all the way to the consumer table. So we think of this as a big system that has a lot of pieces to solve for in this massive industry as we try and solve things like climate change, food insecurity, food safety, and other big problems that are facing our industry. So really happy to be here, and thanks again, Sujala, for leading the conversation.
Thank you. We have a very exciting mix of investors with investments happening at different stages. So I know just in 2020 alone in the food tech space, particularly in the alternative proteins, that year saw a record $3.1 billion in investment. So this is massive, like food and biotech in particular. I feel like currently we're living in the golden time of the industry, unprecedented levels of investment that we've ever seen. All of you seem to be in this space, or have been playing and watching this space for a while. I'd say, where has there been a burst of innovation, for example, in the last 5 years? And what are you most excited about today in this space in terms of innovation and where the industry is heading? Who'd like to kick off?
I can sort of jump in. So we've been investing in the future of food category since 2014 or so. And when I think back to one of the first investments we made in this space through our IndieBio program in Europe, it's a company called Perfect Day, which actually just raised $350 million a couple of weeks ago, and is one of those great unicorns that is raising so much of that capital you're referring to. Back in the day, people sort of thought it was crazy the idea of growing milk without cows, right? And just seemed like, why is that a thing? And so fermentation, precision fermentation, or however you want to call it, we call it protein farming a lot of the time. That is one of the three waves that we invest in. The first wave was even before that, of course, with plant-based proteins. Companies like Beyond Meat. The precision fermentation or protein farming area is the second wave that is really scaling really big now. Obviously, the plant-based protein market's already in the billions of dollars with companies like Beyond and Impossible and other companies. The precision fermentation market is in the hundreds of millions of dollars with some of our leading companies like Perfect Day and other companies like Clara and whatnot that are scaling into the many tens of millions and low hundreds of millions. And then the next wave is really the big third wave is the area of cellular agriculture, or some people call it cultured meat, where you're actually using the entire product of the cell and its output and replacing animal agriculture there. And that is, even though it works, even though it's, many people on this panel may have eaten it, these products, it's very rare to find someone in the world that has accessed it, because it's really not yet commercial. It will be bigger than anything in the end. It will be perhaps plant-based proteins, super efficient, precision fermentation, also super efficient. The only thing that is standing to lose market share in the next 10 years is animal agriculture itself. And we hope, in the end game, of course, for the sake of the planetary health, et cetera, to eliminate, or at least make it sort of a 10% of the meat consumption and the animal protein consumption coming from that area. But all three of those areas, super exciting areas, all three of those areas just in the last 5, 6, 7 years have grown to be real massive markets.
Yeah, I'll echo what Sean is saying and say the diversification of protein and sources of our core ingredients are being rethought from the ground up, which is really exciting to us at FTW. We think that there is a lot of ways that we're going to solve for big challenges like population explosion, where we need more protein, but we also need diverse sense of fats and sugars and salts and other substances that go into our food product that can't come from the traditional methodologies. I think when Sean talks about animal agriculture, he talks about traditionalism. And the fact that we can't scale on that platform, regardless of what we think, there's just not enough land, enough water, enough resources to keep feeding the need we have for protein and the other core ingredients. So we have to look further afield. We have to look at new plants and diversifying our plants, our crop types. So we're very, very excited about what's going on in plant genetics and genomics to make plant production more efficient and in the higher protein production from these plants. We recently did an investment that will be announced soon in a company called Phytoform Labs out of the UK, which is doing genetic trait development to make plants more drought resistant and salt tolerant, and other things that are just needed in the world today, as well as obviously plant-based proteins with our investment in Plantable Foods, which recently raised their $21 million Series A to expand production of a novel protein that has yet to be expressed in the marketplace that we think is going to replace soy as the primary high value, high nutrition protein out in the market. And there's just so much to do, as Sean says, in precision fermentation. He and I are co-investors in at least one company in Geltor that's showing that scaling up in that space is already well known. There's experience and capabilities to scale fermentation, and we just now have to take it to farther reaches within the different capabilities. But I would not stop at protein. I'd say fat production has become very, very exciting. And obviously, Sean and team have companies coming out of IndieBio these days in fat production as well. We see that as the next segment we have to go after as food manufacturers, which is, okay, how do we replace just about everything with scalable production sources? And we've seen a ton of growth in that space. The thing I'm most looking forward is there's been an explosion in sugar replacements or sugar substitutions. And I think there's still more work to be done there. But the one that we haven't seen a lot expressed in is salt and sodium. So to get the flavor that you need out of alternative meats and dairy, you need to add a lot of salt. And that creates the rise for ischemic heart disease and hypertension and other kind of diseases. So how do we get that same flavor enhancement without using these traditional things that can have a deleterious effect on the body as well? So I'd say not only are we trying to solve environmental problems, we also need to solve health problems. I think it's probably a good place for me to hand it over to Andrew to talk about in health, where are we kind of really looking for new opportunities?
So just a twist on, or a slight twist on what these guys are saying. A view that we have is that depending on the arena, the branded finished products, have kind of made a huge impact. And to some degrees, they're already starting to get commoditized. Obviously, plant-based hamburgers. I go to Wegmans, they have a knockoff that's honestly pretty good. All right, and when that happens, you're like, oh my gosh, price premiums for brands immediately start to erode, and they even said that. So we think the magic is actually the stuff that goes inside. The expression is picks and shovels, but that's something we do believe in. And just to build off both of what these guys said, if you can find better solutions for an ingredient or component therein, and you have a competitive advantage, by this I mean a startup, but then becomes a supplier to these big finished food products, that we think there's a lot of magic. And echo completely around the fats piece, and all of us have looked at a ton of different alternatives there, which go in there with vegetable-based fats, which mimic meat and provide those properties that aren't currently really available. And so we're excited about that. And the same with sweeteners, just like Brian said, if you can find a genuine alternative to sugar, hallelujah. Now, we are invested in a company called Bonumose, which actually is not a new product, it's a new process that allows healthy rare sugars to be produced at 1/5 the current cost structure. And that allows, sugars that people know well, tagatose, allulose, and all the rest, but now all of a sudden produced at 85% yields versus 15% yields. So in fact, the magic is in the process, not so much the finished food, because people know what that is already. The Hershey's and Mondelez of this world have been playing around with tagatose and allulose for ages, but they never could afford it. Now they suddenly can. So that's the other big block, is you can produce stuff in a cost structure that fundamentally democratizes and makes it available widely.
And I'll just hop in a little bit with maybe some larger scale perspective, mostly from my time at Tyson, but also in some of the things we're looking at here at Big Idea Ventures on the supply chain side. While the production of plant-based proteins can be more efficient from an energy and from a resource perspective, there is still very much the reality of our supply chain that moves food through this country. And well over 90% of our food moves over the road in diesel trucks and diesel power generators. Those are all pumping out GHGs. Companies are looking for better ways to power the plants that are producing plant-based proteins. It's all well and good if you're using plant-based ingredients, but if you're using coal or oil or nat gas-fired power plants to drive your cook process, you're still having a significant impact on the environment. So I think while the plant-based sector has certainly from a product perspective matured faster than cell-based, the supply chain in general has a long way to go. So we're looking at things at more efficient production cycles, more efficient production equipment. How do we shorten the supply chain, right? If you're looking at some of the more well-known brands, they have very expansive ingredient panels. Well, it's a challenge to gather those ingredients from a variety of producers. How do we shorten that? How do we create a more compact, vertically integrated supply chain that addresses some of those ancillary impacts that, no matter how many soy burgers or mung bean shrimp we sell, there's still a truck that has to move it, right? From a plant to a DC and from a DC to a store, and then the customer goes to the store and buys it, et cetera. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done there, and we're starting to dig in on that as well. On the cell-based side, in our firm, I'm a bit of a renegade at our firm because we have our accelerator fund that does all cell-based, early stage, plant-based, fermentation-based, and that's all very exciting. I tend to take a little bit more of a consumer point of view when we look at sort of branded products, especially on the cell-based side. And I think cell-based has a geographic filter that I tend to apply to those types of opportunities. So what exactly does that mean? Companies that are looking to provide protein to otherwise protein challenged areas of the globe, right? You're thinking about countries like Bahrain, the UAE, Singapore, all who are over 90% dependent on food imports to feed their people. I think cellular based, small geographic footprint, has food security is definitely becoming a national security issue for countries that are highly dependent on imports, especially with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and shutting down shipping lanes and ports. So I think there it is very interesting in terms of, will we see a massive cell-based presence in the US meat case in 20 or 30 years? I don't know if that'll ever happen. And I don't know if it has to happen either. There's plenty of other consumers in the world besides the United States that can validate a product. It doesn't have to be the US all the time, especially when it's a product that serves such an incredible need as protein and nutrition.
Really good point, Tom. One on the supply chain, number two on protein consumption. Well said. I also personally, just as a food scientist and an engineer in the industry, I see products coming up every day from water to chips with protein enhancements. Do we really need to be this protein obsessed in North America? I don't think so personally. And yes, there are definitely countries where they're not necessarily getting enough protein, and this could prove to be a very viable solution. and countries like Singapore that cannot grow protein the way we grow it here. Anyways, before I go too far off on that topic, just switching gears here a little bit. When you are choosing to invest in companies, and many of you here invest in a very early stage when the company is just forming or raising a pre-seed, and oftentimes investors say, oh, we look for a team, we look for technology, we look for market share. Sure, that's all the standard responses I feel like an entrepreneur gets. But despite having all that, what's I guess maybe what should an entrepreneur do especially to get that first check? I feel like that's the most important milestone for an early stage startup, getting that first investment to test their idea, or even like test their hypothesis, or even start building a team around them. That's important. So how does one go about it? And if an entrepreneur comes to you without a team, but with a great technology, has the potential to build a team, and there is good market potential, like what advice would you give that person? Or I guess what will set them up for success? What do they need to have?
I could give a pass at it as a very early stage investor. Generally, we're the first professional investor in any of the companies that we back. We back about 130 companies a year. But in the food space, we probably back perhaps 15 companies a year, very, very active. In terms of how we select, it's more in terms of filling around the edges. There are many, many companies now that are going after the fillet, solutions, whether it be, companies like, Upside Foods, used to be called Memphis Meats, it's one of our companies, or Notco, a plant-based protein approach. There's many people that are going in with even using those different technologies and those different generations of technologies. So we are looking to fill in the edges with, the fats, with sugars, with, really differentiated products, or differentiated and proteins or carbohydrates or whatever. What we are also looking at, though, in terms of answering your other question, do we look at single founders? We will talk to single founders, but single founders will not be as successful as a team, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So we'll talk to them. We'll see if we can't really do the matching and the matchmaking for the single founder. They have to find their own match. We've tried that in the past where we do some matchmaking. We can do that after they're in the program. We can build the team around the founding team, but we can't. We expect the founder to be able to have the capabilities to attract others to their viewpoint and to their vision. And if they can't do that, it's really it's a strong black mark against the founder, that maybe they're not team oriented enough, or maybe they're not able to work with others well. So we'll just sort of send them back to say, hey, come see us in 3 months after you found your co-founder.
So I'll do a take on this, because we also, like Sean, see stuff very, very early, and much like Tom, see stuff coming out of university labs as well. And so given this is a biotech conference, I'm going to focus on biotech founders rather than hardware automation or software and SaaS or novel protein producers, like farming related things. In the biotech space, it's very interesting. You'll see a ton of people at the research level say, I've got an idea, or I've got something to go try and test. And the great news is there's a lot of grant financing or early stage financing that's pre-VC to kind of get you from idea to first generation science, right? And so we champion a lot of people going after that money, either from the government or from institutions. I actually sit on a grant community at UC Davis for a lot of biotech related stuff. And we look for people that are like, yes, in a year after you've proven you can generate something out of this idea, there is the opportunity then to take this out of the public sector and put it in the private sector with private capital. And so we want to help those emerging founders with a great idea. They're sitting in a lab somewhere, figure out how to do their first test or their trial. So I would say that's the first thing, which is how do you prove your assumptions on the bare minimum amount of capital and support, whether it comes from private funding or comes from public funding. It could be Sean, it could be me, it could be grants, it could be angels or friends and family money, which is a typical first investment you go get before you go get a professional investor. But I would say the other thing we look for when we're trying to look at founders that we're going to back is what we call unfair advantage. Something that they know and they uniquely know that's very, very hard for someone else to replicate or do on their own. And again, I'll give a great example of one that Sean and I share, which is Geltor. Alex Lorestani was one of the leading protein engineers at Princeton University who had this technique for making more protein within cell walls than anybody else in the world. And when you go ask people about this, they go say, well, just talk to Alex Lorestani. He knows what he's doing in this case. And so you get these people that are the bastions of expertise or knowledge because they've spent their life studying that and researching it and finding a niche where they can be the expert in that space. We have another one like that in our portfolio called Debut Biotech. So Dr. Josh Britton is a pioneer in cell-free continuous fermentation. And so when we went to read all of the science on this, Josh showed up, or Dr. Britton showed up as the author of all these studies and reports that we were reading. So we're like, okay, this is the guy that has an unfair advantage. He's got the best talent and technique, beside him already. There's not a lot that we have to do to put behind him to get him going. It's the people that come with an idea that have to find the people around them to help them express that. And that's where it comes from, like Sean said, founder matching or getting them connected to the right networks and things like that. And there's a ton of networks out there to meet, other founders and communities. Again, that's not what we do, but we can point you in the right direction. Here are the labs working on the things that are most interesting to you. And in our case, we actually bring an expert network that has deep PhD experience in things like protein engineering or AI and machine learning, if those are things you need to work on, all the way towards hardware and automation. So you can go on our website to ftw.vc/experts and see just a smattering of the experts in the food and agriculture industries that we work with. And we feel like by putting the right people and capital in the way of these great founders, they'll find their way to success, through these type of networks. So giving them those resources is incredibly ancestral in those early days when they have an idea and they have to express that in a product or a service in the very early days.
Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, Andrew or Tom, feel free. But if you can also give some specific examples and point out, like maybe someone that had all of this, but you did not invest, and why, or they had this unfair advantage and you did invest, and how did that happen? So if you can give some examples, that'll be great.
Well, I think, I was going to start by saying, depending on where you are in your life cycle, people ask for different things. So unlike Sean and Brian, we kind of go a little bit later on. We're more of a Series A investor. So by then, you need to have a little more stuff baked into your proposition. So, we're looking for 5 things. I mean, obviously, you kind of, at this point, you kind of assume the fundamentals are in place. The founder kind of knows how to run their business. They have at least a core team around them. They have a fundamentally differentiated product. If it's a food as opposed to an ingredient, the food's got to taste good, stuff like that. The most important thing of all, and I love the words that Brian used of unfair advantage, because we use exactly the same phrase. Food is too friggin' hard, all right, to rely on out hustling the other guy in order to win. You got to have something else, and that's a moat. We use the word moat. So yes, patents are great, and many people have those, but it could be a different business model. It could be a different channel strategy, perhaps. Sometimes brand is your moat, but we're usually too early for that. But we need some sort of a moat that we can say, right, you're going to have an unfair advantage, not just for today, but for years and years to come. The next thing we look for is revenue optionality. So if you are a B2B play, you can figure out how to do B2C. If you're a retail, you can do food service. If you are domestic, you can figure out how to go international. If you're technology, you can apply it here and here and here and here. So those are all things we look for. And again, oftentimes founders, we find, don't think of it that way. They kind of have one lens, I can do this, I know how to play here. But what we can trigger them to start considering is, but that technology works over there. Why don't you do this as well? And all of a sudden, you've opened up this huge new market that they weren't considering before. Because we're Series A investors, we look for some sort of proof of principle. So if you're a technology play, you've figured it out beyond the benchtop. You're in pilot already. Perhaps you even have a demo plant built, or you're about to. You have a book of customers already signed up for these things. We have a company called Bonumos, to give you an example. I've already talked about Bonumos, but just refer to them again. They've done that. They've got 120 patents surrounding their technology. They have, and by the way, they've been protected all over the world. They have done benchtop pilot. They're building a demo plant now, and they have ASR and Hershey as 2 co-investors with us, who are going to be critical commercial partners. If you're a brand, hey, you've kind of figured out how to sell this thing through a store, through an Amazon, 2 or 3 chains that kind of prove that you've got a model that works. And last but not least, this is where we really care, is that you're at an inflection point where you can really start to grow. And the thing that we say is, hey, we're not the scientists. We can rely on people on Brian's team or Sean's team to help you figure that stuff out. But man, so you figured out the technical risk. Now we'll help you manage the commercial risk, because that's what we're really good at. And that'd be the 5 things that we consider.
So I'm not going to try and reiterate what these guys just said, because I agree with them. And we invest across different various stages. So as Brian said, we see things coming out of research facilities. We've done investments into companies like Wild Earth and New Wave and Gather that are far more along. So I'll talk a little bit about the soft skills that we look for in the entrepreneurs. Number one for me is be authentic. Don't try to come in and pretend that you're something that you're not. Be exactly who you are. This is a long-term partnership. We're going to work together a lot, very closely. And I'm going to know pretty fast that the person I'm working with is not the person I interviewed to invest in. And I'm not going to be too happy about that, especially if it goes completely sideways. The other thing I would say is, and some people caution me not to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, is as much as entrepreneurs say sometimes that we don't understand how hard it is to raise money, we do. We wouldn't be talking to you if we hadn't gone through that process ourselves. And trust me, we kiss as many frogs as y'all do to raise money for funds. We've been there, we have done that. So when we offer you tips, when we offer you feedback, constructive criticism, I'm not talking about being a jerk to someone. There's never an excuse for that. But if you're offering constructive criticism around pitch deck construction, the tempo of your pitch to people, we're not doing it as a way to say, oh, I'm not going to invest because you spoke too fast. It's because you spoke too fast. And someone's already told me that I spoke too fast, and I've learned to slow it down. So I would say to entrepreneurs, any opportunity you have to pitch your company is an opportunity to get better at it. And to welcome that sort of feedback. Because if you welcome it, if you're vulnerable but confident, if you're authentic, you're going to be someone we want to find a way to work with, or help you find someone who's a better fit for you at your stage.
Thanks, Tom. I mean, from the sound of it, you're all focused on impact and solving for the big issues, whether it's food sustainability or climate change. I know we're still in the early stages of moving the needle on how we're creating a big impact through the companies that you're investing in and the funds that are being created. But currently, do you have a mechanism to measure impact, whether that's impact in creating sustainable development goals or achieving metrics for the sustainable development goals, for an example, or are there other ways where you measure the impact?
Well, there's a couple of ways, in terms of the climate change issues, there's a life cycle analysis kind of work, a really, really in-depth, full life cycle analysis to determine what the, what the savings are to the environment by using non-animal based proteins. Our various companies do these. Let's see, who's the latest one? But anyway, I think it was Every that just came out with their study, just similar to the Perfect Day study. These are companies that have both gone through IndieBio and both raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And it is sometimes later that you go through all of this really deep scientific study as to the costs and the benefits, because frankly, the processes are still being worked out at the first stages, right? We still don't know. We're backing companies before we know what the total life cycle analysis is going to indicate. But in general, it's about 30 times better. It's about 97% less impact on the greenhouse gases that are generated, which is spectacular and can be improved, frankly, as we improve bioreactor efficiencies and other things going forward. The other, but that's what most VCs are also looking for is simply, are the companies that we're backing getting funded down the line? So that's a measure that we've used. We've had a couple of $1 billion has been invested. I think it's close to $1 billion just this year into our food companies that went through our programs anywhere from now to 6 years ago, that's one measure. Another measure is the upticks and all that, and there's a tremendous amount of performance that's happening in the sector. In general, we're seeing around a net IRR of around 62% for the investments that we're getting in the future of food category. That's across a wide body of investments. So that's another measure or metric that we would measure ourselves against as being financial managers as well. And then it's just the growth in revenue, right? But ultimately, revenue grows, and going to tens of millions or hundreds of millions in revenue. Revenue only grows because of one thing, because the product tastes great, and that is the differentiator. What is making the biggest difference for our most successful investments? It's a question from the audience. It's getting great tasting products that just blow away people, whether that's in the food, new proteins, or if it's in the sugar areas. We haven't invested in salt, but we've invested in 4 different types of sugar companies, Joywell and Magellan Life Sciences, for different types of proteins that recreate the taste of natural sugar, but without the calories and without the sugar impact. So we're interested in investing. I would say we haven't seen enough in the salt replacement front, and that would be an area where we would look to invest in the future. But the metrics that we're looking for are pretty traditional on the venture side, and then untraditional on the climate side.
Got it. There is a question from the audience on what has made the biggest difference among your most successful investments. Who else would like to weigh in on that? Just quickly, we have only a few minutes left, FYI, and we have a couple more questions from the audience here.
I can maybe answer that and add to what Sean just said. We're investing in potential for impact because we're early. That was one of Sean's salient points. It's not out there, it's not widespread, it's not global yet, so it's the potential. And I think at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to truly drive impact is when there's broad scale human adoption of something. And that only happens when there's 3 or 4 conditions in place. And this is a partial list, to be clear. First off, ideally the product, the ingredient, whatever it is, has to have a fairly minimal manufacturing process change for key manufacturers. If they have to retool everything or reformulate everything, they're going to have a lot of reasons why they don't want to do that. All right. So if you really, really want to affect human calorie consumption stuff, you got to have things that get made in a broad scale way and fairly easily. The second one, of course, is price and cost. If it's too costly to make the ingredient, it's not going to get into the products. All right. So that's the other thing. It's absolutely material. And then the last thing, like Sean said, is if it doesn't taste the same, or at least or better, then again, people find all kinds of reasons for not to do it. All right. And companies have spent gazillions of dollars trying to force people to buy stuff that's better for them, that doesn't taste that great. And guess what? They always fail. And the last thing is has to deliver against nutritional promise. A whole lot of stuff looks like it might be better for you, and it really isn't. And so that has to be true as well. So those are things that have to come true for this to really work. And in the end, if people don't eat it, that scale, that adoption is all that matters. So what was the last part of your question? Or did I kind of answer? I'm not sure. Sorry, can't hear you. Yeah.
I think you touched on a few things there.
Okay, great. All right.
My favorite, the nutritional opinion. I know we're creating alternatives, just sometimes it feels like for the sake of creating alternatives, but are they nutritionally on par is a different question. And
I think that goes back to one of your other questions, Sujala, or the impact question, which is what impact are you trying to have? So I think a lot of the impact that we're talking about today, right now in the world, is about impact on climate change and climate resiliency and stuff like that. But that's not the only impact you could have. You can have an impact on human health, you can have an impact on food security. So from an FTW perspective, we go, you have to have a vision to impact one or more of the SDG goals. Whether or not you can measure it right now is almost immaterial, because we have to do what I think Sean was alluding to, was backwards project. If this company is successful, what are the impact levels it could have? And then do you have to bake them into your company already from day one, that that's your vision and mission for this company, that you don't lose focus on that vision? Because we all agree impact is essential to being a good world positive company, as our friends at Obvious Ventures like to say. We want to have world positive impact, and we think that that goes along with profit. And to Sean's point, I want to reiterate that this is not concessionary capital. We're not giving up capital for impact when profits will suffer. We all believe that there's a profitable business to be made in impact on a number of different axes, depending on what impact you're trying to have. But we at FTW definitely want one, if not two or three. Most of our companies have at least 3 SDGs that they're trying to tackle. And then we'll put in frameworks as they get along their evolution when the time, energy, and research allows them to do that. Like I would say in Sean's case, most of the B and C companies are now starting to put that in framework because they have the talent, they have the capabilities, they have the time. When you're an early stage company, you don't have time as a luxury to spend on some of these things too early when you don't have a running business. I want to answer your other question, which is what defines a successful entrepreneur? The phrase that I love to use is strong opinions loosely held. So people that are open when they get new information to pivot, make directional changes, and incorporate good information. So I think Tom said it subtly, which is we've got good information to share as investors, but we're not the only information you should go learn from. You should go learn from what the big CPG companies have done wrong so that you can innovate past them or innovate with them if they need your technology or your solution alongside of that. So all of my good entrepreneurs that I think are eminently backable and going to return for our fund are all people that are like, I know where I'm going, but when presented with new information, I immediately adopt that information into my decision-making ability and make good course corrections within that. Because if there's one thing that I've learned being an entrepreneur and now backing great entrepreneurs is there's never a straight line to success in startup businesses. You always got to seek out expertise, knowledge, capital that will help you get to your end goal. And where I've seen it fail, if you want to talk about fail, is people think they only need money. They don't need advice, guidance, and input. And they go, you're a financial provider, step away, don't help us. And they think they're the next Elon Musk. There's only one Elon Musk. There's only one Steve Jobs. The chances that you are that person are very, very low. The chances are that you're a good person that can take all this advice and craft a great business and product strategy, more likely. Again, there is an exception to the rule. There will be another Elon, there will be another Steve, and we all believe that we have them in our portfolio in these categories. But the reality is it's more likely that you're a good entrepreneur that can take advice and adapt quickly. And that's what we look for.
100% agree on that. I almost feel like there shouldn't be a straight line because I don't think straight lines exist in entrepreneurship. You always have to fail and learn. And I remember one of my early backers, he said, I just want you to make as many mistakes as you can before you get to Series A. I feel like that's the best advice any investor has given me. Just the freedom to experiment and fail very quickly, very early, and then learn. I love that. Last but somewhat important question. What is each of your firms or funds doing to promote inclusion and diversity, not for just the sake of using those words, but we know that data shows female founders get less than 3% of the total investment dollars. Is that part of your focus when you're setting objectives and targets? Is that part of the conversation at all? Please be honest. If it's not, what can we do? Also, as a representative for all female founders and founders of color here, what can we do to have that active conversation going and to really see progress?
Well, I just briefly, there are so many talented life sciences specialists with really deep tech expertise that are female. you'd have to be blind and cover and incapacitated to not be investing in great female founders in this domain. At SOSV, we have 42%, 43% of our founding teams either have a female as a CEO or a member of the founding team. So it's not that 3% number that you're seeing in the industry as a whole. I think some of that will take some way to work its way through, to the later stage firms. But we're seeing tremendous success in, backing female founders and diverse founders. It's hard, because we are very engineering focused. You have to have the technical capability. It's hard if the supply isn't big enough. And I think systemically we need to make sure that there is a greater supply of a more diverse community of engineering talent that's coming out of our educational system. I think it's for example, the last I checked, it was less than 4% for Black engineers graduating from universities. They're, Blacks are already super successful in fields of law and medicine, but we're just not getting enough candidates to have as many, Black engineers. That said, SOSV has backed one Black engineer who's now a billionaire. So we've done well by backing Black engineers as well. So it's always possible, but we just need society to continue to provide us with the talent as well. But the talent is there in terms of female, entrepreneurs already.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and I'll say it starts from team on up. So we at FTW talk a lot about the composition of our team being female and underrepresented just as much as it's white male as well. We're thankful that most of our team is female and underrepresented right now, and I want to continue that kind of as we look for diverse talent. So I think it starts with us being cognizant that our industry needs to change. In fact, our associate, a PhD who's now transitioned into venture, a female PhD from UC Davis, she's starting a group of women PhDs in VC to basically find more female investors to invest in these companies. Because once you put the female member on the board, or they support that, or they're somewhere involved in the cap table, they're going to push for it too. So we think it needs to happen from our industry as well on out. But I'll echo what Sean says is we need to find the talent, and there's the talents out there. We'd be stupid not to back them, because the fact is it's the most untapped and underrepresented market that potentially can provide the highest number of returns. So I literally said to our investors in our last investor meeting, I'm going to name and shame us as not having enough female founders, because I believe that there's money to be made and great founders to be backing, because this is a segment that other VCs aren't paying attention to as much. And so much like Sean, we are upping our game to try and invest in underrepresented female founders, and always measure ourselves against how many that we have in our portfolio.
Just quickly on our side, we've made 7, 8 investments only. So as it happens, quarter of them are female, and one of them is a person of color. I guess the first thing we do 2 things. One is we encourage them to fill out their teams with diversity, because that makes their companies more likely to be successful, and our companies have a pretty good track record on that. The second thing is, frankly, we evaluate them the same way would any other opportunity, which is the 5 things I mentioned earlier. So I won't rehash them, but if they want to get investments from companies or from funds like ours, then they're going to want to be prepared and have done the work, to be ready for an investment, and have done that piece where they're at that inflection point, and that's no different for anybody else. I mean, we put the same standards on anyone for that matter. We don't have goals per se. I'll be blunt, given the newness of our fund.
And just real quick for us, the majority of our founders or founding teams have at least one female on them, so we're over 50% there. And the majority of our team members are female. And given our larger office in Singapore, we have, by U.S. standards, what would be considered a larger minority population in our team construction. So. Some people may say that's not fair because you're using a Singapore office against a New York-based firm. Fair enough. But I think in terms of deploying capital, we're doing a great job. And I can tell you that when we think about spinning up new companies, our first thought is towards what woman or what person of color do we know who could run this business. It's not, now we'll get into a competitive process around hiring, and we'll pick the best candidate for the role. but having 3 daughters, I'm under intense pressure to make every opportunity available as I can. So we try to always have that first in our minds.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. We are almost at time here. I believe we're even 3 minutes about time. So I would like to, I feel like we could continue this conversation and keep it going for the next 2 hours easily, but thank you so much for all your time. It's been an absolute pleasure moderating this discussion and having an opportunity to have some thought-provoking discussions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujala.
Thank you, Sujala.
Thank you, Sujala, and thank you to all the panelists for concluding the final session of the Food Biotech Congress. I have to say that I really do appreciate the final question that you kind of threw out there. Sujala, I think that's really important to bring to the forefront, and it's something that we are kind of trying to champion at LSX as well. And we do have a female founders community that we are, looking to partner and kind of bring together the investor side of things and also the female backed biotechs in the space. So great question. So that does conclude the content for the Food Biotech Congress. It's been great to have you join us over the last couple of days. The platform is still open for the partnering system, and also to look at any of the sessions you may have missed or would like to re-watch for the rest of the week, and also open for next week. I also just want to do a quick reminder, we'd have sent out a post-event survey, so if you could take a couple of moments to do that, that would be great. Also like to thank all of our speakers and the moderators and partners for joining us and kind of sharing their great contributions of their thoughts and how the field is developing. So hopefully next year we'll be able to see you in future meetings in person and be able to try some of the new ingredients and new novel ingredients that have made waves in the space. Yeah, thank you all for joining, and we will see you hopefully all again soon. Thank you.